They say the one who rises earliest catches the prize. What they do not mention is that sometimes the prize is swapped for a teenager dancing in front of a ring light. My name is Ryan Morgan. I am 47 years old. For the past 2 decades, I have worked as the lead floor supervisor at Ridgeway Home and Hardware. It was never glamorous nor pretentious, but it was mine. I arrived before dawn every single morning. I stayed until the final receipt was printed. The floors were cleaned and the lights extinguished behind me. No shortcuts, no skipping tasks. I clocked in as if everything depended on it. Maybe it really did. When I began, Charles Ridgeway, the original founder, was still running the place. He shook your hand with genuine respect. He gave out December bonuses in cash. He would not allow sneakers on shift, claiming they looked untidy. I bought my first pair of black work boots at that time, and wore through 7 more pairs throughout the years. I never skipped work, not even during the flu or when I injured my back in 2009 while moving a heavy pallet of concrete mix alone. I never complained. You do not complain when you are raised to see work as a matter of honor. I met my wife there as well. Rose worked at register number 3 and smiled sincerely, even when dealing with difficult customers. Our first date took place in the break room over some vending machine coffee. She died 3 years ago. Cancer took her from me. She was stronger than anyone I have ever encountered. After that, the store was the only thing left for me to devote myself to. So, that is what I did. I missed out on numerous important moments throughout the years. My son's 8th grade play because I was working a Black Friday shift. My daughter's birthday dinner missed due to inventory duties. My friends stopped inviting me to fishing trips and barbecues since I always claimed I had to work. That did not bother me at all. I thought I would spend my entire career at Ridgeway, possibly earning a small plaque one day. Something simple but meaningful like, in honor of Ryan Morgan, a man you could always rely on. At least that was how I saw it. Over the last couple of years, things began to change. They hired new employees, mostly young people fresh out of high school. They often arrived late, iced coffees in hand, their eyes focused more on their phones than on the task ahead. I trained them and tried to set the right example, but it felt like attempting to teach a cat to swim. They would smile and nod politely, then return to scrolling through their screens. Dress codes became lax. One girl showed up wearing fuzzy slippers. By her 3rd day, a man was working with earbuds in his ears. Management said we needed to meet employees where they are. Apparently their place is stuck on TikTok and avoiding any form of physical effort. I kept quiet and continued to arrive early, doing my job and filling in where needed. That was what I did and what I always had done. Recently, I noticed our boss, Becky, has been observing me more attentively. Her look wasn't one of concern, but of unease. She is 32 and was a shift lead before corporate promoted her to manager. I showed her once how to run inventory reports without crashing the system. At that time, she respectfully called me Mr. Morgan. Voice. Recently, it was always Ryan and never with any eye contact. I did not question it. Not really, but I sensed it. That slow creeping sensation like the ground is shifting beneath your feet, and you are the only one trying to stay steady. Like the place where you devoted your best years is turning into something different. Something you no longer belong to. Last week I was restocking plumbing supplies when she announced my name over the intercom. In a flat tone she said, "Ryan Morgan to the office, please." I wiped my hands on my apron and took the familiar 20 steps I had walked countless times before. But that morning, they felt heavy, as if I already knew what was coming. The office looked exactly the same as usual. Sterile beige walls, filing cabinets that have not held real papers for over 10 years. Yet, she was different. She sat behind the desk in bright green Crocs, legs crossed, eyes glued to her phone until I sat down. "Ryan," she said, placing her phone face down, "I want to begin by telling you how much we value all you have done here." That was the moment my stomach sank. Valuing is always the calm before the storm. "You have been incredibly reliable," she continued sincerely. "Truly, but we are shifting the store's culture in a new direction. More relaxed, more adaptive." I blinked. Adaptive. "You are an extremely hard worker, Ryan," she said, folding her hands calmly. "But, frankly, it is starting to make others uneasy. You have a tone that is, well, a bit intense for the path we want to take." I laughed before I could stop myself. "So you're telling me I am too dependable?" "It's about balance," she said, as if reading from a presentation slide. Honestly, some of the newer employees feel your approach makes them look bad. I just looked at her silently. 2 decades of perfect attendance, zero complaints, and now I'm being sidelined because I gave too much. She cleared her throat. We have decided to bring in someone who better fits our changing brand. We are hiring a content-focused associate, someone who will connect with customers on social media and bring excitement to the store. I imagine that young person who danced by the paint aisle last week, recording themselves lip-syncing with auto-tune and neon lights. That was the person replacing me. I rose to my feet, my legs heavy as if made of stone. She reached out her hand. I shook it and left, without uttering another word. I have replayed that conversation in my mind countless times, more than I care to admit. Every hesitation, every phrase, every glance she gave me across that flimsy plastic desk. Lime green Crocs she wore, like she was going to a casual barbecue rather than dismissing a man who devoted 20 years to that store. I did not respond much then. Shock seemed to freeze me. When someone hits you in the stomach, you don't answer with a speech. You just try to keep breathing. That's exactly how it felt, like the air was suddenly knocked out of me with one quiet strike. Becky, I taught her how to do inventory counts when she was 24 and anxious about the compactor. I stood beside her while she worked. Her initial Black Friday frenzy was something she recalled vividly, advising her not to let customers sense any fear. She often jotted down notes while I spoke. Once, she asked if I ever grew weary of handling everything in the traditional manner. I replied, "If the roof is not leaking, do not tear it off." She smiled then, and I believe she truly understood. Now, sitting in that office, she seemed unfamiliar with the struggles, like she had never organized shelves or witnessed me steer the store through storms, illnesses, and supply chain chaos. Her voice was calm, almost tender, but somewhat rehearsed. "Ryan, we aim to create a more relaxed atmosphere," she said. "Customers relate better to those who seem genuine rather than stiff." I looked at her and asked, "Do you believe I am not authentic?" She offered a tight smile. "You are just so reliable that it can overwhelm some of the newer team members. You do not intend it, but we want Charles Ridgway to come across as more relaxed and involved." Think fun. That phrase echoed in my mind as I left the office. It felt like spending 2 decades labeled the villain in a comedy show. Being punctual and hard-working was treated as if it were an act of hostility. I did not argue. I did not plead for my position. I never beg anyone. My father taught me early on, walk away with pride or do not walk at all. She mentioned the replacement's name, Cade, 21 years old. I had seen him around, a ring light sticking out of his backpack and hair dyed on one side as though dipped in glue. He was always filming. Last week, I saw Ryan Morgan folding t-shirts and had edited the footage to a Drake tune. I remember passing by and overhearing him say, "That's fire," to himself. It seems that is what shoppers want these days. Someone dancing between aisles 12 and 13, flashing peace signs and urging, "Smash that follow button," all while wearing a store apron. When I stepped outside, the air hit me harder than expected. It was July with heat that had a sharp edge. The parking lot glistened under the blazing sun, and I lingered there a bit longer than necessary. I watched a boy, maybe 16, skateboarding past with earbuds in his ears, oblivious to the world beyond his little bubble. I climbed into my truck and sat there resting my hands on the wheel, engine silent. I didn't cry or shout. I just sat quietly. Thoughts of Rose crossed my mind, remembering how proud she was when people called me Mr. Ridgway behind my back, as if I owned the entire store. I reflected on all the weekends we promised ourselves off once things calmed down, and how that calm never really arrived. I thought about the drawings my kids used to slip into my lunchbox before they realized their father was bound to his job more than to them. That drive home seemed longer than usual. The road had not changed, yet something inside me had shifted. Watching the world outside the window felt alien. It no longer belonged to me. Everyone was glued to screens, half smiling at nothing, moving relentlessly, yet going nowhere. I felt like a relic, like an old black and white photo trapped inside the endless scroll of a TikTok feed. When I finally arrived, at home, I had no idea how to handle the silence surrounding me. The house was still. No jingling keys dropping into a locker, no checklist waiting on my clipboard, just quiet. I slipped off my boots and neatly lined them up, as always, even though it was unnecessary. A habit. I remained seated at the kitchen table for a long time, made coffee I did not really desire, mindlessly scrolled on my phone, then I stumbled across Cad's TikTok profile. Naturally, he had one, thousands of followers. There he was, dancing across my sales floor as if it were a vibrant nightclub. One comment read, "Oh my God, I want to shop here just to meet this guy." Another said, "This is how retail is done in 2025. Maybe they are right. Maybe the world moved on without leaving me a message. But there is something unsettling about watching the place you helped build become a stage for cheap jokes. It sits heavy in your stomach. It feels like a betrayal, even if unspoken. I did not break anything. I did not drink or lose control. I simply sat quietly with the feeling. The burden of being dismissed, not because I failed, but because I worked too hard, too relentlessly, because I cared when no one else seemed to. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing the fridge's quiet hum, an occasional dog barking 2 houses away. My body felt exhausted, but my mind kept replaying it. The Crocs, the smile, the way she said laid back as if it were a quality, not an excuse, and how I shook her hand firmly like a calmness settled over me, even as everything inside began to unravel. The first thing I realized was the absence of sound. No alarm ringing at 5:15, no coffee bubbling in the pot, no morning chatter from the kitchen television, just pure quiet. For the first time in more than 20 years, I had nowhere to rush to. I lay there longer than I probably should have, watching the ceiling fan slowly spin as if wasting time. I did not leap out of bed, did not pull on my boots, did not check my phone for the work schedule. I simply remained still, and it felt strangely wrong. Eventually, I got up around 8. A time later than I had gotten up since before my youngest child was crawling. No lunchbox to prepare, no clipboard to review, no Rose humming in the kitchen, just me and the silence. I did not even bother brewing coffee. What was the use? Coffee had always been my energy source. Without work, it just seemed like hot water pretending to have meaning. I wandered through the house as if seeing it in daylight for the first time. The sofa had a faded spot on one arm that I had never noticed before. The bookshelf was gathering dust. I found an unopened letter from the electric company and chuckled. I did not even remember receiving it. I had been living like a ghost in my own home, punching a clock while the rest of life moved quietly in the background. It struck me late in the morning while standing in the hallway. I had no clue how to occupy myself. I sat in the recliner and flipped through channels, hoping to accidentally find a sense of direction. Nothing held my attention. The news was just noise. Repetitions felt like ridicule. In the end, I settled into silence once more and simply absorbed it. There is a peculiar kind of buzz in a house when it becomes too quiet. The refrigerator, the rustling wind outside, the creak of ancient floors shifting like old bones. My thoughts drifted to Rose. She used to remark that the saddest noise in the world was a man left with nothing to occupy his time. She was not mistaken. I glanced at the photographs hanging on the walls, the children's graduations, the trip to USAID we nearly canceled because I could not get coverage for a weekend shift. Rose had insisted we go regardless, saying the mountain would last longer than the store. She had been right. She was right about many things. Around midday, I slipped into jeans and a fresh shirt, took my keys, and stepped outside. I had no clear plan, just a feeling that I needed to move. Without realizing it, I found myself driving toward Ridgeway. It only dawned on me when I turned onto the frontage road and spotted the store's sign in the distance. It is strange how habits outlive jobs. I parked opposite the street near the old diner where Rose and I used to stop after late shifts. From that spot, I had an unobstructed view of the front door. The same windows, the same smudges, the same crooked sign stating, "We match competitor prices," that I had reminded them to fix each week for 2 years. And right there outside was Cade, his phone balanced on a small tripod, music pumping from a Bluetooth speaker. He was performing an arm-flailing routine with choreographed movements, spinning slowly as if in a dance. Wearing a Ridgeway apron loosely tied around his waist, as if it were just a costume and not a proper uniform, a couple walking by stopped, puzzled, and unimpressed. The man shook his head and muttered something to his wife before pushing the door open. Ryan Morgan didn't even notice. He was too absorbed in hitting whatever rhythm the algorithm had decided was important that day. I felt a burning sensation rising in my chest. Not just anger, but something deeper, like painful grief. That floor was my territory, my sanctuary. I had sacrificed blood, sweat, and moments of life just to keep it intact. Now it had become a stage for some kid chasing likes instead of doing the actual work. And he wasn't even doing that well. I clenched the steering wheel, its leather worn smooth under my hands. A part of me wanted to walk right over, smash his foolish tripod, and tell him to get off my floor immediately. But I didn't move. I just sat there, watching. The truth was, it wasn't really about Ryan Morgan alone. Not completely. He was only a symptom of a much larger problem, one I had refused to acknowledge until it consumed me entirely. The world no longer operated on loyalty. It now depended on appearances, clicks, engagement, and the latest fleeting trend. Men like me were the framework, invisible once the paint dried. I closed my eyes briefly and inhaled deeply. The scent of freshly cut grass and car exhaust surrounded me. Real things, things that didn't require filters or hashtags. When I opened my eyes again, Ryan was still dancing and grinning as if he owned the place. But something inside me had changed. I was far from finished. Not truly. I had no clear plan for what to do next. Yet one thing was certain. I had more to offer. Not to Charles Ridgway, not to Becky, but perhaps to people like me, those who still believed in hard work, in showing up, in genuinely caring. Maybe that voice still held some meaning. My voice. I started the truck and drove away without a backward glance. Let him keep dancing. Let them keep laughing. The world might have shifted, but I had not spoken my last word. Not by a long shot. I never imagined I would become the kind of person to go viral. Honestly, I didn't fully grasp what it meant until it happened to me. It all began with a cup of diner coffee and meeting up with a friend I hadn't seen for a few years. Marcus, a retired union welder, still sharp, still loud, and surprisingly better with a smartphone than a man his size had any right to be. We met because I needed to unload, and he was the kind of guy who wouldn't interrupt while I found my words. I shared everything, the Crocs, the handshake, the kid dancing in aisle 12. He reclined in the booth and whistled. "Ryan, that's the saddest thing I've heard all year," he said. Then he leaned in. "But also the most relatable. Ever thought about sharing that story with others?" I laughed. "What, like a blog?" "No, man. A video. Just you, your story. You don't even have to dance." I admitted I had no clue about making videos. He promised to help. So, we drove back to my place, sat in my garage by the lawnmower and a dusty drill press, and he set up his phone. An overturned paint container. "Just speak," he urged. "Be honest." So, I did. There was no preparing, no script. I settled onto a folding chair, wearing a Ridgway sweatshirt I had not gotten around to discarding. I looked directly into that tiny black camera lens and said, "My name is Ryan Morgan. I dedicated 20 years to Ridgway Home and Hardware. I never called in sick. I was never late. I picked up shifts when others did not bother to show. I missed birthdays, holidays, weekends, even funerals. And just last week I was dismissed. Not because I messed up, but because I worked too diligently." I paused, looked into the camera, and added, "They said I made others appear bad." Marcus uploaded the video that night with the caption, "20 years no call-outs. Fired for trying too hard." I thought maybe a few people would watch it. Perhaps some former colleagues would silently agree. Maybe there would be quiet support in hidden corners of the internet. I did not anticipate the overwhelming response. By the next morning, there were 1,000 messages. By lunchtime, the video had 100,000 views. By the week's end, it exceeded 4 million views. The comments arrived swiftly and powerfully. Someone said, "My father was laid off after 30 years. This hit me hard." Another wrote, "I was told I intimidated coworkers by working through lunch. Thank you for voicing what so many of us feel." Subscriptions followed. "We need more men like you, Ryan." It was more than sympathy. It was a movement of unity. People around the country began sharing their personal stories. Pictures of worn-out work boots, clock-ins with perfect attendance and pink. People were getting fired from positions they had devoted their lives to. A hashtag began to spread rapidly. It was called the Ryan Standard. Someone even put it on a t-shirt. I saw a video clip of a teacher in Ohio mentioning my video during a union meeting. The story was picked up first by a local news outlet, and then by a national morning program. They contacted me to request an interview. I responded by saying, No, I am not interested in morning shows. I care about the people who are actually listening. Around the second week, I received an email from someone working at Charles Ridgway's corporate headquarters. The message was polite but corporate and superficial in tone. They stated they were aware of the recent media coverage and were reviewing the management methods at that particular location. I chose not to reply. What could I possibly say? Becky disappeared from the background of Ridgway's social media posts. And that did not go unnoticed. This sparked rumors about a leadership change. There was no official statement, just a silent withdrawal. That fits the pattern. They always make a big fuss when arriving, but slip away quietly when leaving. Meanwhile, I continued to create videos. Not just about myself, but about work ethic, about the meaning of showing up even when exhausted, about how pride is not a flaw when it comes from doing your absolute best. I shared stories from my days working on the floor, how I used to memorize the arrangement of every single aisle, how Rose once helped a lost child reunite with his mother without attracting attention. I did not preach, I simply spoke the truth, and young people responded powerfully. They reached out to me for guidance. Ryan, how can I approach my supervisor to ask for extra hours? How do I avoid exhaustion? How can I put in effort without being taken advantage of? I responded to everyone who reached out. Although I was no longer employed at Ridgway, somehow I was accomplishing more good than I ever managed behind that counter. One evening, Marcus said, "You realize you've started a movement, right?" I shook my head. "No, man, I just spoke the truth." He smiled. "Exactly. I never sought this platform or chased after followers. Maybe that is why it resonated, since it was not about fame or appearances. It was just a guy in his garage sharing what was taken from him and discovering he was not alone." People began calling me Coach Ryan. I did not correct them. Occasionally, I still pass Ridgway when I walk. I believe Kate is still there, but I have not noticed him dancing recently. Perhaps they asked him to tone it down, or maybe the camera stopped rolling once interest faded. I do not linger long. I have other projects to develop now, ones that do not require permission from a manager wearing Crocs. 5 days. That is how long it took for everything to change. On the 5th morning, after handing in my badge and leaving Ridgway, my phone buzzed with a text from a former colleague, James from receiving. It read, "Becky's gone. No emoji, no further details, just that." At first, I found it hard to believe. Corporate rarely acts quickly. They usually wait for issues to fade, hide problems beneath policies and memos. But this time, the pressure was overwhelming. The story had momentum. News anchors were discussing terms like anti-loyalty culture and quiet firing, while my garage video kept spreading worldwide. It seemed that finally, someone at corporate glanced up from the quarterly report and realized this situation was not going to disappear. There was no announcement, no farewell email expressing gratitude for my service. Just simply gone. I did not feel victorious. Not really. That is not how things work. There is no celebration when something you cherished suddenly rejects you. Yet, there was some kind of calmness, as if the atmosphere had cleared a bit. The next day I heard that Cade was moved off the sales floor. Content integration liaison, someone said. A fancy term for a desk job. From what I understand, he now sits in a small office editing promotional videos for the store's social media channels. No more dancing around the power tools, no more being the mascot in an apron. I am not sure how he feels about it. Perhaps he is relieved, or maybe he will burn out and find something else before the month ends. I don't blame him. He did not break the system. He simply played the game they dealt him. What surprised me was the call from Charles Ridgway Corporate. A different voice this time, someone higher up, polite and rehearsed, every sentence coded in HR charm. They said, "We would like to invite you back, Ryan. Your position is available. We recognize the contribution you made to the team." I did not interrupt. I let him finish, then replied, "I appreciate the offer, but I am already where I need to be." He hesitated. "Are you certain?" That was all. I ended the call, composed and collected. There was no resentment lingering inside me. I had nothing left to justify to them. Instead, I devoted the following days to getting ready for something I never imagined I would be involved in. The Midwestern Labor Values Summit. An organizer had seen my video and invited me to speak. 10 minutes, she said. Just speak like you do online. No need to make it fancy. Still, I bought a new shirt with sharp lines and a firm collar, the kind Rose would have selected for me. The summit took place in a community college auditorium. folding chairs, black coffee, and styrofoam cups. People with clipboards, others in hoodies. Folks who seemed like they had just finished working 2 jobs before coming here. I stepped onto the stage behind a wooden podium that wobbled if you leaned on it too much. No teleprompter, no bright lights, only a microphone and a room full of eyes. I cleared my throat and said, "My name is Ryan Morgan. I spent 20 years working on the floor at Ridgeway Home and Hardware. I never called in sick. I never missed a shift. Last week they told me I was too reliable, that my constant presence made others uneasy." The room fell silent, then a few quiet laughs, dry and knowing. I'm not here to criticize anyone. I came to talk about balance, about what it truly means to give your best without surrendering everything, about how our understanding of hard work has been distorted into either martyrdom or ridicule. I spoke about pride, about showing up not for praise, but because it truly matters. Reflecting on the nights I drove home with sore knees, yet still felt I had achieved something meaningful, I noticed heads nodding and people wiping their eyes, not out of sympathy, but from shared understanding. I concluded by saying, work defines a part of us, but it should never consume our entire identity. Respect must be considered a fundamental right, not an extra benefit. If we fail to support one another, the next person is already waiting for their chance. Afterward, numerous people approached me to shake my hand, ranging from the young to the experienced. One woman embraced me warmly and murmured, "My father was just like you. He would be proud." That evening, I sat alone in my kitchen with a bowl of leftover chili, watching the sun slowly disappear behind the trees outside. I wasn't longing for the store, but for a sense of purpose. Yet, I discovered new ways to create that meaning and to share it forward. Perhaps that is what Rose would have wished, for me to offer my heart without letting it be consumed. Occasionally, I still receive messages from people seeking advice or simply expressing gratitude. Others share their personal stories. I read every single one and try to respond whenever possible because it truly matters. These days, I rarely make videos, only when something feels genuinely important to express. I have realized the online world does not need more noise, but a little more honesty. Today marks 10 days since I left Ridgeway, and only 5 since Becky was removed. Everything happened so quickly, maybe that is a blessing. Had the process dragged on, perhaps I would still be stuck, merely tolerated but never truly seen. I have never learned how to smile for the camera, and I still don't. This evening, as I rest in this peaceful home, with spotless dishes resting in the sink and no alarms scheduled for the morning, I find myself smiling quietly.